Hi, I'm Lance Henriksen. You're watching Brian Lomax's Movie Talk.
And so the Nightmare on Elm Street series soldiers on with part 5, The Dream Child. This sees the characters of Alice and Dan returning to the fore. Alice kind of taking over the role of Nancy, really, from the first and the third films. She's now become the heroine of the series, so to speak. Anyway, the two of them start the film off by having a little romp in bed, and then Alice falls pregnant. And throughout the rest of the film, Freddy tries to invade the nightmares of her unborn child's dreams in order to kill other people. So he drags people, Alice's friends, into the dream world through her unborn child. This film is directed by Hopkins, who would later go on to direct Predator 2, Ghost in the Darkness, and also have some ties to 24, the TV series. He's a talented director, but he's not someone you would call an auteur. However, I think he does a really good job with this, and I think with this particular outing, they have a much more solid foundation to work from. The script is a lot better, I feel, than the last outing. And this series is, to be honest, it's starting to follow the rules almost of the Star Trek franchise, only the opposite way around. So it's like every odd number film seems to be good, and every even number film seems to be bad, at this point at any rate. And I know we've got a new Nightmare coming up, and that's supposed to be a good one in the series. So again, you know, an odd number of films. So I don't know what Freddy's Dead is going to be like. But judging from the pattern we've been seeing, I'm not expecting too much from it. Anyway, Dream Child. It's actually a good film. It doesn't blow me away or anything, but there's quite a bit of focus to it, a lot more focus in the writing department. I think if there's anything about this film that's going to put fans off, I'd say it's that there isn't that many really bloody deaths in it. I think this one kind of focuses more on the story, more on the character of Alice and what she's going through than it does on just simply slashing people up. Now, people often come to these franchises for that. They come for the slasher element and the slasher element alone. They may be disappointed with this one. I personally found it a bit refreshing that they were trying to concentrate more on at least some kind of story. They haven't completely jettisoned the slasher element though. There are still some good death scenes in this, particularly that of Dan. Again, the character carried over from the previous film. He gets this death scene on a bike. Okay, it kind of turns Freddy into this quipping joker of a character. He's, you know, they go overboard to try and make him the sole focus, the hero kind of thing of the franchise in a way, if a killer can be a hero. But it's a decent scene, you know. It does something creative in the visual effects department, in the practical effects department, I should say. And I like it. It also kind of makes a bit more sense than previous films with the setup, the way it's done. So we start off with him in the car, and then he nods off, and then he kind of has this whole thing on a bike, and then when he eventually gets killed, we see him back in the car again. So there's a logic there. He doesn't suddenly die on the bike and stay on the bike, which is kind of something I would expect in previous films, because no one's bothered to think out the logic of this and where he actually is in the kind of awake world as opposed to the dream world. So I feel like the logic has kind of been thought out a bit better in this film than some of the previous effort. There's a few freaky looking visuals in this as well, like when Greta dies and her face kind of all puffs up and she comes back into it in the dream world a few times where she looks like that. And just that look on her face is something from a nightmare, you know. It's something that gives me the chills, I think. There's another couple of scenes that don't quite work. So you've got this comic book nerd, he dies, and basically Freddy turns him into paper. But it means there's no tension there. There's no scare. It's not really horrific in any way, because it's essentially just Freddy chopping up paper. With this film, we do get to revisit some of the history again through the nightmares. In part 3, we learn about Freddy's origins, how his mother was kind of locked in this asylum with 1,000 maniacs, 100 maniacs I should say, and they raped and abused her, and Freddy is kind of the result of that. We see that through the dream, bearing in mind that it is kind of a nightmare version of it, the dream version of it, you can forgive any lapses in logic. But like when you first see it, I kind of think, what that, if this is if it's a true representation of what happened, if Alice is seeing the actual events only through a dream, then you kind of have to ask the question, what the hell was Amanda doing down in that weird kind of basement bit with all those maniacs, unsupervised, without, I mean, there was two guys up on the little bridge bit, but there's no one else with her, so that was in a very dangerous position. But like I say, you kind of have to, I guess, accept that this isn't how it actually happened, it's just some weird kind of twisted nightmare version of how it happened. There are some really nice visuals, as I say, towards the end of the film. We go into this dream world and it's almost like Inception before Inception. We're dealing with levels here, so because we've got this unborn child and Freddy is kind of using that child's dreams, but it also affects Alice because the child is in her. It feels very much like this film could have had some kind of influence on Christopher Nolan's Inception. Obviously no way near as good, but that seed is there, I feel. Now there are still some moments of stupidity in this film. I don't quite understand why Alice's friend goes to the asylum by herself to look for the remains of the mother, or to set her free, and the way in which that is also visualised also doesn't quite work. I don't like the way it's done, the way she comes in, finds the mother there, and then she turns to bones and then completely disappears. It doesn't really make much sense. Like with the third film, when they had to get Freddy's bones and bury them into consecrated ground, that made sense, but they don't really do that with Amanda. It's not like they have to find her bones and take them somewhere and bury them properly, which I would have preferred. I think that would have worked better. They don't. It's just they go more for a visual kind of thing, and it doesn't really work from a kind of logical standpoint. Other than a few little niggles like that, as I say, some characters doing a few things that are questionable, on the whole, it's actually a pretty decent film in the franchise. It's certainly better than the last outing, and I would give it a 3 out of 5. So if you've seen this film, please comment below and let me know what you thought about it. And tell me, what do you think of the film's kind of, I guess, lack, not completely, but slightly, of the more kind of slasher element that we're used to in the Freddy films. Comment below, let me know, and until next time, thanks for watching.